You can spend 10 minutes with someone kind, normal, even pleasant, and still walk away feeling like something inside you just shut down. Not because they hurt you, not because the conversation was bad, just because being around them felt heavier than it should have. And that is the part people rarely understand. They think exhaustion only makes sense when something dramatic happens, a fight, a betrayal, a difficult person. But sometimes you feel drained by people who did nothing obviously wrong. And that is what makes you question yourself. You start wondering whether you are too sensitive, too distant, too difficult to be close to. But what if the exhaustion is not random? What if your brain is doing far more work around people than you realize? Some people enter a conversation and simply talk. You enter a conversation and your mind begins scanning. You notice the pause before someone answers. You notice the tension behind their smile. You notice when their voice is flatter than usual. You notice when the energy in the room changes by 1 degree. And maybe you do not even think of this as a skill anymore. It just feels automatic, normal. But the brain pays for everything it processes, and some people process far more than they know. That is why social exhaustion is not always about talking too much. Sometimes it is about monitoring too much, reading too much, adjusting too much, carrying too much. This often shows up in very quiet ways. Someone says, "I'm fine," and part of you already knows they are not. A friend replies with one dry sentence, and your mind starts checking what shifted. You walk into a room, and before anyone even speaks, you are already reading the emotional atmosphere. Who feels irritated? Who wants approval? Who is holding something back? Who might need something from you? And while all of that is happening, you are also managing yourself. How you sound, how you seem, whether you are being warm enough, whether you are being too much, whether you are somehow responsible for keeping the moment smooth. That kind of mental work is easy to miss because it does not look like effort from the outside. But inside, your brain is running background tasks the whole time. This connects to something psychology understands well: high self-monitoring. That means you are not only expressing yourself, you are constantly noticing how you are coming across and adjusting in real time. It can make you socially aware, polite, easy to talk to. It can also make every interaction feel like a performance with invisible rules. There is another layer too: emotional contagion. The human brain naturally mirrors the emotional tone around it. You do not just observe other people's stress. Part of your nervous system begins to echo it. So when someone is tense, part of you tightens. When someone is irritated, part of you prepares. When someone is emotionally messy, part of you starts organizing the mess before they even ask. That is why being around people can feel like standing in weather you did not choose. You are not only having a conversation, you are standing in their mood, their pace, their tension, their need. And over time, the brain learns something very important. People are not just connection. People are input, pressure, prediction, emotional labor. Once the brain learns that, social contact stops feeling restful. It starts feeling expensive. That does not mean you are broken. It may mean your brain adapted too well. Maybe you grew up around unstable moods. Maybe you had to learn early that peace depended on reading the room. Maybe it felt safer to notice small shifts before they turned into something bigger. Maybe love came with emotional responsibility. Maybe closeness meant managing other people first. The brain never forgets a strategy that once protected you. It keeps using it long after the original situation is gone. That is one of the strangest things about adaptation. It survives its own necessity. So now, even when no one is asking much from you, your brain may still act like your job is to monitor, adjust, and stay one step ahead. And that is exhausting. Not because you dislike people, because your nervous system treats social life like work. Think of it like this. For some people, being around others is mainly expression. For you, it may also be surveillance. And surveillance burns energy. Your mind is not just listening, it is measuring, it is predicting, it is preparing. It is translating everything that was never spoken clearly. That constant inference creates fatigue. The brain systems involved in understanding other people are incredibly useful. They help you read tone, intention, and emotional meaning. But when those systems stay overactive, ordinary connection begins to feel like ongoing interpretation. Instead of hearing simple words, you hear layers, subtext, mood, history, risk. That level of processing can make even a normal conversation feel dense. And then there is the threat system. Not always panic, not even fear in an obvious sense, just quiet alertness, a subtle readiness, a constant sense that something might need your attention. That kind of low-level vigilance is one of the biggest hidden drains on the mind, because alertness is not neutral. Alertness costs energy. This is why solitude can feel less lonely than socializing, because solitude removes the incoming signals. No tone to decode, no facial expressions to manage, no emotional temperature to adjust to, no hidden expectations to track. For a while, your system gets to stop translating. And that relief can feel so deep that you start craving distance from almost everyone. But that is where people misunderstand the problem. The answer is not to become colder. It is not to stop caring. It is not to force yourself to become more social and ignore what your nervous system is telling you. The real shift begins when you stop treating your exhaustion like a personality flaw and start seeing it as a processing pattern. That changes everything. Because once you can see the mechanism, you can interrupt it. The first thing to practice is naming the load, not just the feeling. When you feel drained after being with someone, do not stop at, "I'm tired." Ask what your brain was doing. Were you managing their mood? Reading between every line? Trying to stay likable? Trying not to disappoint them? Trying to predict what they needed before they said it? This matters because the brain handles named experiences better than vague ones. When you put language on a pattern, you reduce confusion. And confusion is exhausting by itself. Instead of feeling like something is wrong with you, you begin to understand what was actually consuming energy. The second shift is learning that not every interaction deserves full access to your nervous system. You do not need to deeply process everyone. You do not need to decode every tone change. You do not need to offer full emotional attention to every message, every conversation, every social moment. Attention is limited, and the brain learns importance from repetition. If you repeatedly treat every social cue like urgent data, your mind will keep doing that automatically. But if you begin to pause and rank what actually matters, the brain slowly becomes less reactive. Someone sends a dry message. You do not immediately analyze the hidden meaning. Someone seems slightly off. You let them own part of their emotional state without turning it into your private assignment. That is not detachment. That is boundary formation. The third shift is smaller honesty. People who get drained easily often wait too long to admit they are full. They stay in the conversation after their mind has already gone quiet. They keep sounding available after their energy is gone. They suppress the truth because they do not want to seem rude, distant, or difficult. But suppression has a cost. The more you hide your real state, the more energy the brain uses to maintain the mask. Small honesty prevents large depletion. Not dramatic honesty, not emotional dumping, just simple truth. I need quiet. I can't talk long today. My mind feels full. Let's continue later. That kind of honesty closes the gap between what you feel and what you perform. And the smaller that gap becomes, the less drained you feel by being around people. The fourth shift is transition space. Your nervous system needs help switching modes. If you go from social input straight into more stimulation, your brain never gets the signal that the interaction is over. That is why short moments of silence matter. A slow walk, 10 minutes without messages, a room with no one asking anything from you. That pause is not avoidance, it is recovery. It tells the body there is no longer anything to monitor. And when the body feels that, the mind begins to settle. The fifth shift is perhaps the most important. Pay attention to who makes you edit yourself and who does not. Some people do not drain you because they are more entertaining. They drain you less because they feel safer. Your brain does not have to predict as much around them. You do not have to perform calmness. You do not have to earn the right to be quiet. You do not have to carry the entire emotional weight of the moment. Safe connection is efficient. Unsafe connection is expensive. That is why one grounded person can feel lighter than 10 familiar ones. The nervous system is always asking one question underneath everything else. Do I have to work hard to be here? When the answer is yes, you leave tired. When the answer is no, you leave more like yourself. So maybe the deeper truth is this: you are not drained by people because you are weak. You are drained because your brain has learned to over-participate in every room. It notices, it absorbs, it predicts, it manages, and then it wonders why it feels so tired. But once you understand that, the exhaustion stops feeling mysterious. It becomes readable. You begin to see that not all connection is equal. Some connection asks for your presence. Other connection quietly consumes your processing power. And the more clearly you feel that difference, the less guilty you become about protecting your energy. You do not need to stop being perceptive. You do not need to become less caring. You do not need to harden yourself just to survive ordinary conversations. You only need to stop treating your sensitivity like a tool that belongs to everyone, because it does not. And maybe that is the thought that stays with you after all of this. Your exhaustion is not proof that you need to love people less. Sometimes it is proof that you have been carrying more of them than your mind was ever meant to hold.